Hello, welcome back to Unveiling Truths. The last video that that I was speaking on was in reference to Abraham. We were wrapping up the rest of Abraham, just to make it clear that Abraham had more children than just Isaac and Ishmael. He married another wife. He had 6 children by her, Keturah, and he also had concubines. It didn't state how many concubines, nor did it state how many children he had with those concubines. But it was very clear that all of his children, excluding Isaac, was sent away. He sent them towards the east. They were given gifts, but he sent them away from Isaac while he was yet alive, simply because if they had remained, it would have been a bitter civil situation over his property, at which they still do things like that today. So to just minimize the possibility, he sent everybody away except for Isaac, which was with Sarah. And so we learned that both Sarah and Abraham did laugh, being human. 25 years had passed. I mean, who most humans would have, been being at their age and that amount of time slipping past them, it would have been hard for any of us to have remained with strong faith after 25 years. So, but it just goes to show that some things are brought more to light than others, but both of them did have doubt. Okay, so now we're going to get into Moses because Moses is the deliverer that God chose to go into Egypt to bring out his people. And he told them that they were going to be in bondage for 400 years, and that definitely was a fact. They were in bondage, and when they began to cry out, when it got so vigorously stressful, they began to cry out. It is just amazing how when a Hebrew is in a highly stressed situation, you don't have to tell him to call out to God. It's just in him to do it. When he gets really stressed, he will start crying and making vows and pleading, if you get me out of this, I will do this, and this. He'll start making all kind of vows. And you got to be careful when you make a vow, because when you make a vow, it's something that God will hold you to. And I'm going to read you a story where a guy made a vow biblically, and sometimes when we ask God for something, we don't know how he's going to give it. We don't know when he's going to give it. And sometimes we are hoping it to be one way, and it can turn around to be a whole nother way. But he did give us what we asked. So be careful about your words and about your vows and choices you make. Like it tells you, a just man falleth 7 times and rises again, but he's just. He's trying to do right. Some people are out there sinning willfully. They know that they're living in sin, and they have no desire to change their ways. Well, those are the people that, when God is letting you know that the wages of sin is death, those are the people that seed will be affected. When it tells you he'll deal with your seed, he's talking about people who are willfully in sin. You're in sin and you're not even trying to do right. Those are the people that seed will suffer as a result of just bad choices that they're making. So think about your seed before you do things that are just not right before God, because they're the ones who will suffer the consequences of what their forefathers and mothers have done. So we're going to get into a lot of stuff, because now by the Hebrews going into Egypt, it wasn't that they done anything wrong. But see, God wanted them to know who he was. He wanted them to be aware that he was their God. and to let them know that they were his people. So he had to put them in a stressful situation so they'd call out on him, and he would send in a deliverer, and that he would free them. But he let them know that you are my people and I'm your God, and this is what I'm requiring of you. I've done a lot of good. I took you out of all that stress situation that you were in, and I freed you up, and I blessed you with goodly lands in the promised land, and you know, the land that floweth with milk and honey. I've done good to you. So all I'm asking is that you be my children, you be my chosen people, follow my laws, my 10 commandments, my statutes, my judgments. You know, he just wants you to be obedient to his word because he knows what's best for us. A lot of times we think we know what's best for us, but then in the end, at the end of that road, we found out it wasn't a good road to take. I've done it where I've made choices that I thought were good. They seemed so real, they seemed so right, and in the end they were not. So God knows what's best. So we have to start looking at him and letting him be in the lead. So we're going to go into some scriptures about Moses. We'd already discussed how Moses' mother, you know, hid him, and then when he got too big to be hid, she kind of put him in a ark type basket, and the sister followed. And then when Moses' daughter had compassion, Moses' sister went and asked if she could go get a Hebrew woman to nurse the child for her, and of course she went and got Moses' mother. And the Egyptian woman even paid Moses' mother to nurse her own baby. Show you just how good God is. So when it comes to how God is going to do something, you can't know how he's going to do it. I mean, he's just so awesome in how he does what he does. And by the time it's done, it's too late. You know, by the time Moses was a grown man, he was able to venture out on his own. It was too late then. So we're going to talk about Moses now. We're going to continue talking about Moses now. Okay, so I will get this started right now. Okay, we read earlier how Moses fled from the face of Pharaoh. Well, Pharaoh sought to kill him and he fled. Okay, and it tells you that, well, we can go up further. It says, this is how he met, okay, excuse me. Okay, so we kind of left off at this point here when Moses fled from Pharaoh. Now when Moses heard this thing, when Pharaoh heard this thing, he sought to slay Moses. But Moses fled from the face of Pharaoh and dwelt in the land. Let me cut this light so you can see that better. Just a second, please. Okay, that should be a little better. Now when Pharaoh heard this thing, he sought to slay Moses, but Moses fled from the face of Pharaoh and dwelt in the land of Midian. And he sat down by a well. Now the priest of Midian had 7 daughters, and they came and drew water and filled the troughs to water their father's flock. And the herds came and drove them. And the shepherds came and drove them away. But Moses stood up and helped them and watered their flock. And when they came to rule their father, he said, "How is it that ye come so soon today?" And they said, "An Egyptian." Notice how they mistake Moses for an Egyptian. Well, if he was raised up in the wisdom of the Egyptians, it's no wonder that he would act completely like an Egyptian. And he more than likely looked as an Egyptian as well, despite the fact that he was probably no longer in Egyptian attire. You know, if he's running from them and he's looking like an Egyptian, he would stand out. So he probably changed his attire, but we don't know that because it doesn't state it. So it says, and they said, an Egyptian delivered us out of the hand of the shepherds, and also drew water enough for us, and watered the flock. And he said unto his daughters, and where is he, and why is it that ye have left the man? Call him, that he may eat bread. And he said unto his daughters, and where is he? Oh, I'm sorry. Next verse. And Moses was content to dwell with the man, and he gave him Zipporah, his daughter, and she bare him a son, and he called his name Gershom. For he said, I have been a stranger in a strange land. And it came to pass in the process of time that the king of Egypt died, and the children of Israel sighed by reason of the bondage, and they cried, and their cry came up unto God by reason of the bondage. See, God put them in a predicament so that they would call on him. Okay? God put something in his Israelite people where they can sing. You know, they can hum. You know, they just have a rhythm in them. You know, God put certain things in his Hebrew people. And one thing they know how to do, and it's amazing, in black communities, you see a lot of churches. They may be of different religions, and we're going to even get into that, because I'm going to show you where God states that only God's prophets are supposed to be of their brethren, and they're supposed to follow, or the lead over them is supposed to be their brethren. But as we will learn, that a lot of the churches, the founding religions in America, are not Hebrew, or not of the Hebrew tribe. Practically every religion of this society is not of the Hebrew tribe, but yet they read the Bible as if it's they themselves that the Bible is worded about. So things like that we're going to go over as well, simply because it's the truth. I mean, if you research the founders of Baptists, Seventh-day Adventists, Methodists, all of them, you'll find out that their founders were not Hebrew. And so they're following the religion of people that are not even the people of God. You know, they're not God's chosen people. So we need to go over things like that, because it's time to wake up. When God has a prophecy that's about to take place and you don't know what's going on, you know, I mean, when he comes and gathers his people and you talking about you're not going and you stay here, you wish you had left. So it says, and it came to pass in the process of time that the king of Egypt died, and the children of Israel sighed by reason of the bondage, and they cried, and their cry came up unto God by reason of the bondage. And God heard their groaning, and God remembered his covenant with Abraham and Isaac and Jacob. Now, when he heard their groaning, he remembered what he promised Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Not so much for them, but for their fathers. See, when you do good, God will bless your seed. And when you do evil, you bring evil upon your seed. So try to do the right thing, because God is looking at your heart. And when he sees that you're earnestly trying, and although you may mess up and you may make mistakes, don't beat yourself up in the flesh, because you did your best. But God is still going to bless you because he sees your heart. But the ones who sin willingly and deliberately and purposely, knowing they're living in sin and has no desire whatsoever to change, those are the ones that will their seed is going to be affected. But as you can see, Abraham's seed is going to be blessed, although they went through so much. But God, if they had prayed earlier, if they had come together earlier, they would have still did the 400 years, because that was just prophesied. But they went 430 years actually. Anyway, it says, and God looked upon the children of Israel, and God had respect unto them. That means that they must have been trying to do the right thing, because God said he had respect unto them. He didn't look at them and see that they were willfully sinning. When the Egyptians turned on them and they started mistreating them, the Hebrews hadn't done nothing against them. They didn't do anything to deserve that. It's just that that's how the Israelites rose up against them. And so that happened. Okay, so now I also want to go to 4. Okay, I'm kind of glancing over my notes. I'm trying to, because I'm trying not to bypass. Okay, now, when God finally got Moses' attention through the burning bush, the bush burned, but it wasn't consumed. And Moses was curious, how come that bush is burning? You get brush fires, but the tree doesn't stay. It burns up. But this tree, nothing happened. It was still as if it was not on fire, but yet fire was all about it. And he was wondering how possibly could that bush not be burning. So God got his attention, and he told him to take off his shoes, because the place where he stood was on holy ground. And so he began to talk with Moses from that point. Now, right here, he's gotten Moses' attention, and he's trying to prepare him to come back to Egypt. And he goes, and Moses answered and said, behold, Moses didn't want to do it. But behold, they will not believe me, nor hearken unto my voice, for they shall say, the Lord hath not appeared unto thee. And the Lord said unto him, what is in thine hand? And he said, a rod. And he said, cast it to the ground. And he cast it to the ground, and it became a serpent, and Moses fled from before it. And the Lord said unto Moses, put forth thine hand, and take it by the tail. And he put forth his hand and caught it, and it became a rod in his hand. And that they may believe that the Lord God of their fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob hath appeared unto them. And the Lord said furthermore unto him, now this is something that they left out of the Hollywood movie, The 10 Commandments. It says, and the Lord said furthermore unto him, put now thine hand into thy bosom. And he put his hand into his bosom, and when he pulled it out, behold, his hand was leprous as snow. Well, we know snow is white. So that means if his hand changed white, then he must not have been white. He must have been a different color, or his hand would not have turned white. It would have turned the opposite. There's the only way that would have been a miracle. Now listen to this. It says, and he said, put thine hand into thy bosom again. And he put his hand into his bosom again, and plucked it out of his bosom, and behold, it was turned again as his other flesh. That proves to you right there that Moses was not white, because it would not have been turned different from his other flesh, unless if his entire body was white like snow, leprous as snow, then it couldn't have turned as his other flesh if he was, you see what I mean? It could not, if his body was black and he changed it to snow, white as snow, that would be a miracle. Then he put it back in and it became again as his other flesh, that would be a miracle. But if he was already white, turning his hand white still or the similar color would not have been a miracle at all. That's the reason why they left that out of the Ten Commandments, because they could not figure out a way to make that, to fit that in. Because if his other flesh was already white, then God would have turned it black as tar or some other color, green, purple. But it would not have been, if he were already white, he would not have made his skin white if it's already white. There's no miracle in that. It's only if he changed the color. So that's why that was left out of the movie. And it came to pass, if they would not believe thee, neither hearken to the voice of the first sign, that they will believe the voice of the latter signs. So this is him preparing Moses to go in to get his people. Okay? So now, we're going to go to Exodus. What is that? Well, I think I did. I think I did read that they did cry out to the Lord. Okay. So let's go to 3:6. Moreover, okay, it says, moreover, he said, I am the God of thy father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob. And Moses hid his face, for he was afraid to look upon God. And the Lord said, I have surely seen the affliction of my people, which are in Egypt. He already knows that they're his people. I have heard their cry by reason of their taskmasters, for I know their sorrows. And I am come down to deliver them out of the hand of the Egyptians, and to bring them up out of the land unto a good land, and a large, unto a land flowing with milk and honey, unto the place of the Canaanites, and the Hittites, and the Amorites, and the Perizzites, and the Hivites, and the Jebusites. Now therefore, behold, the cry of the children of Israel is come up unto me, and I have also seen their oppression, wherewith the Egyptians oppressed them. So see, it's something that the Hebrews are going to have to do. It says here, now therefore, behold, the cry of the children of Israel is come up unto me. When you open your mouth to God, and that's all you have to do, because he's already your God. You just need to open up your mouth and let him know what's going on. And he'll start moving in your life. And when you start seeing him move, and after he got you comfortable again, do not forget him. That's one of the big mistakes that the Israelites made, and we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about it. Because see, a lot of times, as long as a person don't need God, they don't glorify him. They don't thank him. I mean, just look up. Even if you're driving in your car, just look towards the east and bless the Lord. You're at a stoplight, you're at a stop sign, you're facing the east. Look up into heaven and just thank you, God. And we're going to get into his name as well. Okay, we're going to get into that, because these are things you're going to need to know. So anyways, he's letting you know about all the different, God didn't move until they reached a point where it was so bad that they started crying out to God. Now, maybe once it reached 400 years, he might have sent him earlier. But it could have been also that they cried and it took Moses. He sent him, but Moses had to grow up and to grow into maturity. So, as with Abraham having to wait on Isaac, sometimes we ask God for something and we're expecting it immediately. At least I know I do. I'm not going to even tell you any fib. Sometimes I guess when I ask him, I do things on my own. I'm pretty independent. But when it's something that's too big for me and I ask him, I'm expecting him to help me like within a few months. I'm not expecting to wait a whole lot of years. But sometimes he has to mature us. Sometimes he's got to get us cleaned up. He's got to prepare us. So it may not be overnight that some of us that some of us grow and learn. So he's got to mature us. We have to suffer a while, and suffering makes us strong, but who wants to suffer? I know I don't, but yeah, I've done more suffering. It seems like when you don't want to suffer, you're the one that's going to do the most suffering, But anyway, we talked about, let me see, Moses' excuses. Moses didn't want to do it. And God assured him that he would be with him. Okay, so now we're going to go over the plagues. It's like 11 plagues that God put upon the Egyptians, or you might already be familiar with the plagues, but let's go over some of them just in the event. Okay, we'll go to Exodus 17. And this is the first plague when he oh, I'm sorry. I'm wondering how come it's okay. Okay, so we'll go down to verse 17. Okay, thus saith the Lord, in this thou shalt know that I am the Lord. Behold, I will smite with the rod that is in thine hand upon the waters, which are in the river, and they shall turn to blood. So one of the first ones he started off with, he turned the rivers into blood. But we're also going to see where God hardened Pharaoh's heart. Let me see. Okay. So first he turned the rivers into blood. And then we're going to see what he did next. I'm getting kind of tired. Been up since 3 in the morning, and we went over, we wrapped up Abraham, and now I'm trying to wrap up Moses, and I'm starting to feel the weight come down on me. Okay, so let's see. And if thou refuse to let them go, behold, I will smite all thy borders with frogs. So then he brought frogs up on the land. But I'm trying to look for where he hardened Pharaoh's heart, because God can soften your heart like he did with Pharaoh's daughter, or he can harden your heart. Okay? Now, let's see. It says, then the magician said unto Pharaoh, this is the finger of God. And Pharaoh's heart was hardened, and he hearkened not unto them, as the Lord had said. But then there's going to be times when, and then he sends in flies. It says here, let's see. Else, if thou wilt not let my people go, behold, I will send swarms of flies upon thee, and upon thy servants, and upon thy people, and into thy houses, and the houses of the Egyptians shall be full of swarms of flies, and also the ground whereon they are. That means plasma is going to be absolutely everywhere. And I will sever, I'm sorry, I'm going down to the next verse. I'll just bring it up so you know where I am. And I will sever in that day the land of Goshen, in which my people dwell, that no swarms of flies shall be there, to the end thou mayest know that I am the Lord in the midst of the earth. So I will put a division between my people and thy people. Tomorrow shall this sign be. So there was not one, all the plagues that he put on Pharaoh did not affect his people that were in Goshen. Okay? And Pharaoh hardened his heart at this time also, and would not let the people go. But we're going to find that the Lord hardened his heart too. Excuse me. And the Lord did that thing on the morrow, and all the cattle of Egypt died. But of the cattle of the children of Israel died not one. So you see the difference, how he and then let you know again, Pharaoh's heart, and the heart of Pharaoh was hardened. So God kept making his heart to be hardened, because he was going to bring about these plagues upon him. I mean, if he would have let them go, then he wouldn't have been able to, let me see, what was 9? Let's go back. And it shall become small dust in the land of Egypt, and shall be a boil breaking forth with blains upon man and upon beast throughout all the land of Egypt. So now he's putting boils on them. Now that's got to be pretty painful. If we recall, Job was covered with boils from head to toe. And I can imagine that was a very miserable state, you know, as he sat in ashes, you know. So we're still in 9, huh? Okay. Okay, it says, behold, tomorrow, about this time, I will cause it to rain a very grievous hail, such as hath not been in Egypt since the foundation thereof, even until now. So now he brung in hail, and everything outside will end up dying. You know, cattle or whatever's left outside. And it will not affect Goshen. Okay. And I'm just going over the plagues. You know, you can always go back and read the entire scriptures if you want. But it's quite a bit of scriptures to read. So I'm just basically pointing out the plagues that he brought upon the Egyptians. Okay. And Moses said, we will go with our young and with our old and with our sons and with our daughters and with our flocks and our, is that right? Wait a minute. Oh, I'm sorry, 4. Let's go up here. Went too far. Okay, else if thou refuse to let my people go, behold, tomorrow will I bring the locusts into the coast. So now there is the plague of the locusts. Okay. And then we'll go down. And the Lord said unto Moses, stretch out thine hand towards heaven, and that there may be darkness over the land of Egypt, even darkness which may be felt. That means that must have been a thick darkness. I mean, so black you can't even see your hand in front of you. And Moses stretched forth his hand towards heaven, and there was a thick darkness in all the land of Egypt for 3 days. Okay. And I'm thinking about now, here it is. Now we find out who hardened Pharaoh's heart. Then it says, but the Lord hardened Pharaoh's heart, and he would not let them go. See, God can harden hearts, or he can melt the hearts. He can soften the heart. He softened Pharaoh's daughter's heart to take in Moses, to raise Moses, but then so that he can keep putting more and more plagues on Pharaoh, he hardened, the Lord hardened Pharaoh's heart. So now it's God that is making Pharaoh's heart harden. That's so that he can keep giving him a beat down, so that he can perform his miracles before his people. Because see, his people are watching all this, and he's actually showing his people his might. So now we're going to go to see, what did I do wrong? And all the firstborn in the land of Egypt shall die, from the firstborn of Pharaoh that sitteth upon the throne, even unto the firstborn of the maidservant that is behind the mill, and all the firstborn of the beast. So every firstborn would die, was going to die. And so see, this is why God kept hardening Pharaoh's heart. And the Lord said unto Moses, Pharaoh shall not hearken unto you, that my wonders may be multiplied in the land of Egypt. This is why he kept hardening Pharaoh's heart, so that he could keep giving him a beat down, that my wonders may be multiplied in the land of Egypt. So the more Pharaoh hardened his heart, the more God was able to keep whooping him. So this is why God took a minute. But see, you got to understand, the Hebrews are watching. So they're watching all this. So he knows he has an audience. And, you know, when we know we got an audience, we trying to make it look good. And which he did. Because when he finally brought the Israelites out, and they were such a stiff-necked people. Oh my goodness. It is, I mean, I thank God I'm not God. Because where God was ready to consume him in a moment, I'd have probably zapped him too. I mean, because with all the wonders that they saw, it is just amazing that they could be just so stiff-necked and turn away just so quickly. My goodness. So Hebrews, get a clue. Please get a clue. And it came to pass that at midnight the Lord smote all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, from the firstborn of Pharaoh that sat on his throne unto the firstborn of the captive that was in the dungeon, and all the firstborn of the cattle. And that's, isn't that kind of sad though, when many innocent people that did not want to resist, they end up suffering because of Pharaoh. They lost their firstborn child because of Pharaoh's stubbornness. Well, actually, it was God that hardened his heart so that he could, do his wonders in the land. But sometimes the innocent suffer with the guilty, because there were some Egyptians that left with the Israelites, and I'm going to show you how I know that in scripture as we go along. I'm going to show you where some of the Egyptians did leave. Because see, you have to understand that not all the Egyptians were bad people. They might have had them as slaves, but some of them, treated them as if they were part of the family. They were good to them. They showed mercy towards them. So when God turned the tables around, they weren't considered enemies to the Hebrews. Not all the Egyptians. And I'm going to tell you something, the same is going to be even in America. When God takes us back to our land outside of America, some Americans are going to go back home with us, and I'm going to show you how I know that as well. So, and the tables are definitely going to completely turn. And it's scriptural. Okay? And Moses stretched forth his hand over the sea, and the sea returned his strength when the morning appeared, and the Egyptians fled against it, and the Lord overthrew the Egyptians in the midst of the sea. So this is Pharaoh's army. They got drowned in the sea. And the Lord said unto Moses, stretch out thine hand over the sea, that the waters may come again upon the Egyptians, upon their chariots and upon their horsemen. So he took out Pharaoh's army. Yep. And so by Pharaoh not having an army because they're all drowned in the sea, that left the Egyptians wide open and vulnerable to any adversary or enemy that would want to come upon them. But God was the one who hardened Pharaoh's heart so that he could bring about his wonders against Pharaoh. Okay, so now he gets them delivered, and I'm going to have to kind of quit here because I'm not really quite prepared to go into when they go into the wilderness, because I want to show you just how stiff-necked the Hebrews were. I mean, just murmuring and complaining and just a stiff-necked people. And we're still that even still today. We haven't changed much. But a lot of things has happened as a result of slavery. And I'm going to talk about the effects of that, the aftermath effects of slavery. Sometimes I read on the internet where they state that Israelites are illiterate or can't read or whatever, but those people who are judgmental of these Israelites that may be to some degree illiterate, you have to understand that through slavery, if you have not been allowed to read the language that you're speaking or write in the language that you're made to speak in, you're completely deprived of education. And this has been throughout generations. And then when you do go to school, funding is not made available in impoverished areas, such things as that, where and then the money is being controlled, where it's only primarily most of the minimum wage jobs are by the Hebrews. You know, the degrading or low income jobs are primarily done by the Hebrews. And so people say equal opportunity. Well, you know, if you've never been I wouldn't even say African American, but if you've never been, I'm definitely not going to say Negro, that's not a name. They're Israelites, they're Hebrews. But if you've never walked a mile as a black or as a Hebrew, then you have absolutely no knowledge as to what their everyday lives consist of. You don't understand that when you take a child and you put him in an impoverished area, then because he's trying to express himself, you call him illiterate. Why? Because you deprive him of what he's needed, which was just a decent education. His mind has been dummied down, not to think, not to grow. His mind has been set through slavery to not even think, just do what you're told. Well, that type of mind doesn't know how to think because it's been trained not to think. So now we become set free, and I speak with people in impoverished areas now where they talk about how the schools are funded, and they're not learning anything because they can barely even keep teachers at their schools. You know, so now you have kids that aren't learning, and if they aren't learning, what use is it even appearing in school when they're really not growing in knowledge? So before you look at an Israelite and judge him, you got to understand what he's been through. And where would you be had you gone through the exact same thing? Most races could not have even endured what the blacks have endured. Most of them couldn't handle the level of pain, being beaten, that we've endured. I mean, blacks are such a strong, probably some of the strongest, physically strongest people upon this earth. You know, that's because we are accustomed to working. But when we've been taught not to do what our culture had always been, and that is to work, to move. Now you got a lot of people who are overweight. You know, you got a lot of people who are just really still struggling, and they would just not have the peace that they desire and that they seek until they return to their land. And once they return to their land, God is going to bless them with rest. In other words, they're not going to be stopped by a cop and killed because a cop just wanted to shed some blood, a black's blood. They're not going to have to worry about this type of nonsense anymore. You know, this would be a thing of the past. And at that time, the other nations are the ones that are going to have to worry at that point, because God is going to deal with them. Everything that we do, we have to give an account for. But one thing I do know is that not every white is going to be affected, because not every white are our enemies, our persecutors, or our haters. So they're not going to be affected by this, what God is about to do. But the ones who have done us unjustly and wrong, we're going to read about the story of Lazarus, a beggar who just desired, as a matter of fact, let me look. We'll read that right now. Oh, sorry. I must be tired. Okay, let's see if we can pull old Lazarus up. And then after I do, okay. And so after I do this one, I'm gonna go ahead and close, because I've been up Okay, we're going to read about Lazarus. Now, understand that this is just, this isn't a person being abused and mistreated and murdered and hung and lynched and all that. This is just a beggar just wanting food. And we're going to read about the consequences of someone not even helping a beggar, what their end result's going to be. So can you imagine where the people are that have mistreated God's people throughout the years? And I'm going to read where they even knew that they were mistreating God's people, but because it stated that they would do this, they just took it to the extreme. Not knowing, or probably not caring, because they figured they wouldn't be here, that it would come back on their seed. And this is what people aren't understanding. When you do wrong, when you go out and you do unjustly, it's coming not just back up on you, but your kids are going to suffer as well. You know, it tells you that you will suffer 7 times for your sin. And we're going to read that, and then I'm going to have to close. But it says, because we went through the plagues, but I want to get when we're about, it's a lot I want to make sure you know about the Israelites coming out of Egypt. But I'm not prepared really right now to go into that. I don't have my notes organized, so I don't want to go into that and be jumping all over the place. But I'm going to read this. And there was a certain beggar named Lazarus, which was laid at his gate full of sores. And